Hey everybody. Welcome back to everybody who's been here before. Welcome in to everybody who's new. I'm going to do something that's a little odd for me today. I'm going to be self-censoring just a hair because I feel like what I'm going to be talking about is kind of a big deal and I don't want YouTube to smash down potential views. I tend to not self-censor as a general rule, and my views when I'm a little more crass, brash, and say what I really feel tends to be down just a little bit. But like I said, with some current things going on, I feel that what I have to say today is very important. I want you to come back in time with me just a little bit. Talking the early 2000s era, to be specific. I was in high school, middle school, high school, and I want you to think about the television shows that were on at the time and how they portrayed certain things. And the television shows in particular I'm talking about are the ones dedicated to my age group, okay? The time we're talking, middle school, high school students, and how they framed what was going on. Anyone who's listened to this podcast before probably understands that I talk a lot about what they tell you in TV shows that programs how you think and portray things in a certain way to just make it really normal. TV shows like One Tree Hill, The OC, Gossip Girl, Veronica Mars, that framed all of the high testosterone elite athlete males as the bad guy. They were the ones that were more likely to spike a girl's drink, take advantage of them, and just in general be a bad dude, right? Now, why would that be? These men, especially in One Tree Hill, and in the others also, don't get me wrong, could only really be tamed once they found the right girl and she changed everything for them. But until they had that right girl, they were the bad guy. They could only be redeemed if the girl redeemed them and tanked their testosterone levels down. Okay? That frames into what I've been thinking on, and I've mentioned it in a few podcasts if you're a fairly loyal listener, is the 2006 Duke lacrosse case. This has been rattling around in my head because to me there's a thread between it and where we stand as a society today that is incredibly relevant. So welcome back to the Green Egg Girl podcast. The Duke lacrosse incident was of particular interest in my sphere. I had a brother who graduated high school in 2006. So he and all of his friends, this was kind of a big deal because they were all about to go off to college. And parents were concerned for a whole myriad of reasons, and you'll understand why getting in. But this is something that has always stuck out in my head because I was the geek, okay, but the bad guys were not the jocks. Those were actually my brother's friends. Like, he was a super popular jock guy, and therefore all of his friends were also super popular jock guys, and they were all incredibly kind. And yeah, they had a lot of testosterone. They said crazy things. They played funny games. They were crass and brash and all over the place, but genuinely lovely human beings, which of course is not what is portrayed in media. So for those who don't remember this the way that I do, and for those who never heard of it because you're too young, in 2006, 3 men from the Duke lacrosse team were accused of group essaying an exotic dancer they had hired for an off-campus party. She is black, so they were accused of yelling racial epithets at her while essaying her. And it destroyed their lives. It destroyed their lives for over a year. It destroyed their reputations for even longer. They did not get full vindication until 2024, when the girl went on, well, she was never really a girl, when the woman went on a podcast to say that she made the whole thing up. I'll play that clip later. So on March 13th of 2006, Duke lacrosse team was crushing it. They were winning everything, top of the division, on their way to just setting records and everything else. They had an off-campus party. Like most off-campus ragers at a college, it was a rager. They hired an exotic dancer, and they were all drinking and having a good time. And then later, the police got a phone call saying that a girl had been group essayed and had racial epithets yelled at her. 46 of the 47 lacrosse players had DNA taken. 3 of them were brought in later. 2 of them at one time and 1 a month after, in April. Or 2 in April, 1 in May. And they were held on a $4,000 bond. These 3 men were accused, and the media, and the prosecutor in the case also, the district attorney in the case, all pushed the narrative and framed these men out to be rapists. I remember this. I remember mothers being concerned for their daughters, telling them to stay away from jocks in college. I remember all of my brother's jock friends who were all about to graduate being very concerned because this looked shady, which it was. So on and so forth. Now, Duke University did not handle the situation well. You had professors out who were pushing the narrative and talking about how, oh, this is just a common thing with all of these athletes, and, you know, especially when you get the ones that are from like elite high schools because they're just elite and they think that they can do whatever they want. This was the narrative. And here's several articles proving it out. In March 26th of 2006, there were protests outside of the home where this allegedly happened. They were banging pots and pans early in the morning, protesting the attack, which at the time was still just alleged. And the police came out saying, we're not saying that all 46 were involved, but we know some of the players inside the house on that evening knew what transpired and we need them to come forward. That's the police. The police were making these statements. If that's not made to frame individuals as being guilty, I don't know what is. If what the alleged fact, if what is alleged is in fact true, it's totally deplorable, the Duke spokesman said. It's not what this institution stands for, nor do we believe it's what our students stand for. So Duke was already out throwing students under the bus. Michael Nifong, the county DA, who's later disbarred, I'll talk about that, came out and said, "The thing most of us found so abhorrent, and the reason I decided to take over myself, was the combination gang-like grape activity accompanied by the actual racial slurs and general racial hostility. There are 3 people who went in a bathroom with the young lady, and whether the other people knew what was going on at the time, they do now, and have not come forward. I am disappointed that no one has been enough of a man to come forward, and that they would have spoken up, and if they would have spoken up at the time, this may never have happened." Everyone involved with this case, media included, ran headlines such as, "A team's trouble shock few at Duke," where professors came out and said, yeah, they're just allowed to do whatever they want. They framed these men as rapists for a year. In April 2007, they were finally declared innocent by the North Carolina district attorney. It went all the way up to the state to take care of. No evidence was found. And she couldn't recall key details of the event. They ended up suing Duke University for its handling of the situation and all of the press associated with it. And in June of 2007, they were all awarded $20 million each. Tells you how badly Duke effed this up and slandered these men. The city of Durham in 2014 ended up with the settlement, and they ended up donating to a cause because of that. But David Evans was a senior at Duke. He ended up finishing his degree there a year late, but he ended up finishing his degree and leaving. Colin Finnerty ended up transferring out, and Reeg Seligman ended up transferring out. Their lives were ruined for a year, and their reputations tarnished for over a decade because of this. Crystal Mangum continued, even after all of the settlements were made and everything was done, she continued with her story. She went so far as to write a memoir called Last Dance for Grace, the Crystal Mangum story, in 2008, in which she wrote in detail about the alleged incident. She went on interviews, and she said she was going to seek further justice. She maintained her story until a podcast interview with her in prison. And she was in prison for having murdered a boyfriend. But the podcast Let's Talk with Kat went to her prison cell and spoke with her. And here's what she had to say.
That night, my Reed Seligman, Colin Bennerty, and Dave Evans, they took me into their home, and they trusted. The Bible says that you shouldn't do harm to your neighbor that lives trustingly beside you. And they were my brothers, and they trusted me that I wouldn't betray their trust. And I testified falsely against them by saying that they raped me when they didn't. And that was wrong. And I betrayed the trust of a lot of other people who believed in me. and made up a story that wasn't true because I wanted validation from people and not from God. And that was wrong when God already loved me for who I was, regardless. I didn't need to seek validation from Him because I already had validation from Him. I just didn't know it. Um, and I hurt my brothers. And I hope that they can forgive me. And I want them to know that I love them. And they didn't deserve that.
She was seeking validation. Now, earlier in this podcast, it's not very long, by all means, it's linked in the bio. Please go watch it. She was getting a psychology degree at the time. We've talked about psychology, ladies and gents. Talked about it a few episodes ago. But she ruined these men's lives and reputations and maintained her story for 18 years before finally coming out and saying it was all a lie. In her prison sentence, in 2010, she had done all kinds of crazy things with a boyfriend, stalking him, burning his clothes, etc. And then in 2013, she stabbed her boyfriend. Got into a fight with him and stabbed him, and he ended up dying of complications. That's why she was in prison. She never faced any penalty for destroying the lives of 3 young men. And more, by the way, they canceled the entire rest of the Duke lacrosse season that year. So all of those men who'd worked so hard had everything they worked for taken away from them because of her false allegation. But she destroyed the lives of 3 young men for a year, derailed their future for a year, and tarnished their reputations for 18 years. 18 years. On a whim, because she felt like it. And the media and the professors at Duke University all supported it, as well as the district attorney for the city of Durham. Mike Nifong ended up being disbarred in 2007. This is a man who had great political aspirations. And this case would have made for a big leap forward in a political endeavor. You take down 3 lacrosse players, you play into the narrative, they go to prison for SA, huge case, national coverage. His next political move and political campaign would have had a ton of support. The problem is, he omitted key DNA evidence and lied to judges about it, withheld it from the defense. And I already read one of his quotes. He went into the media, insulted the players, called them hooligans, asserted their guilt, put motives on them for racial reasons, for their alleged crime, and just in general amped up the public sentiment of their guilt, which, when the general portrayal of the high energy, high testosterone, high performing male athlete in all TV shows is portrayed as the bad guy, it made it very believable, did it not? A whole bunch of media outlets have removed their articles. Thankfully, the New York Times was good enough to leave some on there. Many of them on there, which is why most of the articles I'll link are there. I will link the entire archive of basically a year's worth of this scandal reports, but a whole bunch of the articles have been removed. But at least you can see the titles so that you can see how the narrative was spun. against these three men, and how the powers in the area played into it. Now, this happened to three relatively unknown men whose only crime was being exceptional at a sport at a big name university and throwing a party. And some girl who just wanted attention destroyed their lives and derailed their futures, and they had to fight to get them back. Now, this is all the way back in 2006. Now, look at 2015 to current and the Me Too movement and what has transpired since. Think about how easy it is now for women to make accusations and destroy the lives of young men. Look at what political motivations do to good men. Now go look at the media headlines today and tell me, do you really think it's possible that everything the media is telling you is the truth in regards to high-profile cases that are going on at current? Because I know a ton of people who believed that back in 2006. I know even more people who believed everything that went on from 2015 on. But I took a look at the media. I took a look at the televisions. I watched the shows, and I saw what the Matrix wanted us to believe. And I chose to look at that with care and discernment. I'm going to be continuing down this general type of path over the next couple of weeks. But I want you to take a look at what has gone on in your lifetime, what TV shows put out there to try to sway how you are going to accept headlines when they came your way. I want you to go look back at what happened during your young life in the media, like I just did with the Duke case, and see how many people were willing to sacrifice the lives and reputations of three young men for clout. Duke University professors, spokespeople for Duke University, police departments, district attorneys. Now think about that on a global scale. Think about having people who make such a change on a global scale and wake people up. What would the powers that be willing to do to them? I hope I gave you something to think about in the week to come. I hope you all have a fantastic week. Enjoy the rest of it. And be very wary of what you're seeing the media portray. Till next time.